Episode 2, Srivijaya, Golden Fleets and Mandala Power, 7th to 13th centuries. 2.1 War, Dominance by Navy. If Funan's strength came from a combination of land and sea, Srivijaya's power was derived almost entirely from the sea. It was a typical thalassocracy, maritime empire, and its military might lay in a powerful navy capable of patrolling and controlling vast sea lanes. Srivijaya's primary strategic goal was to monopolize trade. To achieve this, they used their naval power to control the two vital choke points of global trade at the time: the Strait of Malacca and the Sunda Strait. 8 Any merchant ship wishing to travel from the Indian Ocean to the South China Sea, from the Arab world and Persia to China, had to pass through the waters controlled by Srivijaya. By establishing checkpoints and collecting taxes, Srivijaya turned its geographical position into a huge source of revenue. To consolidate its power, the Srivijayan fleet frequently conducted conquests, subjugating rival ports and petty kingdoms on the islands of Sumatra, the Malay Peninsula, and parts of Java. 8 Their aim was not to occupy large territories like continental empires, but primarily to eliminate competitors and force other trading centers to submit and join their network. However, Srivijaya's maritime dominance also faced enormous challenges. From the east, powerful kingdoms in Java like Medang always aspired to break Srivijaya's monopoly. Medang's attack on the capital Palembang in 992 was a serious warning. 8 But the heaviest blow came from the west, when the Chola Empire of South India, another naval power, launched a large-scale invasion in 1025, destroying Palembang and capturing the Srivijayan king. 8 Although this attack did not completely destroy Srivijaya, it severely weakened its prestige and naval strength, marking the beginning of a long decline. 2.2 Politics, the Mandala model. Srivijaya's political structure is one of its most unique and fascinating features. Unlike the centralized, bureaucratic state model of China or later Angkor, Srivijaya operated on a mandala model. 8 In Sanskrit, mandala means a circle. In political science, it describes a system where power is not defined by clear borders, but radiates from a center. In this case, the center was the Malay hegemonic state with its capital at Palembang, and later Jambi, headed by a king with the title of Maharaja. 8 Surrounding this center was a series of vassal states, petty kingdoms, and port cities. These vassals were essentially independent political entities with their own rulers, but they had to acknowledge Srivijaya's suzerainty, regularly pay tribute, and participate in the common military economic network. 8 Their loyalty was not guaranteed by a direct administrative apparatus from the center, but was based on a complex combination of factors: the military strength of the Srivijayan fleet, which was sufficient to deter, the personal prestige and spiritual power of the Maharaja, and, most importantly, the economic benefits that came from participating in the trade network controlled by Srivijaya. This model was very flexible, allowing the empire to rapidly expand its influence over a large and diverse geographical area. However, this very looseness was also a weakness, because when the central power weakened, the vassals could easily secede or switch their allegiance to another, stronger center of power. 2.3 Economy. Masters of the Maritime Silk Road. The foundation of Srivijaya's existence and prosperity depended entirely on maritime trade. 8 The empire turned the seas of Southeast Asia into a global transit hub, connecting the major economies of India, the Arab world, and China. The Malays of the Srivijayan period were skilled sailors and shipbuilders. 8 They not only transported goods from other nations, but also added valuable products from the archipelago itself to the trade flow. The lands under Srivijaya's control were the source of luxury goods sought after by the whole world: spices like cloves, nutmeg, and cardamom, precious woods like agarwood, camphor, and especially gold. Srivijaya's wealth was so great that in ancient texts, this land was often called by the beautiful name Suvarnadvipa, the island of gold. 8 To protect and maximize profits, Srivijaya enforced a vigorous trade monopoly policy. Any merchant ship passing through the Strait of Malacca had to stop at Srivijayan ports to pay taxes and conduct trade. Any rival port that dared to challenge this monopoly risked being attacked and subdued by Srivijaya's fleet. 8 In this way, Srivijaya not only profited from tariffs, but also controlled the prices and flow of strategic commodities. They became the true masters of the maritime Silk Road for many centuries. 2.4 Culture, the Buddhist beacon. Besides its role as a commercial empire, Srivijaya was also a cultural and religious center of international importance. Along with the flow of goods, religious ideas also spread throughout the region via merchant ships. Srivijaya became one of the most important centers of Mahayana and Vajrayana Buddhism in the world at that time. 8. Srivijaya's scholarly reputation was so great that many famous monks and scholars from other places came here to study. The Chinese monk Yijing, on his journey to India in the late 7th century, stopped in Palembang for many years to learn Sanskrit and translate scriptures. He recorded that there were more than 1,000 Buddhist monks studying there and advised other Chinese monks to study in Srivijaya for a few years before going to India. This shows that Srivijaya was not just a place of religious practice, but also a top-tier center for Buddhist education and scholarship. The language used in trade and administration was Old Malay, while Sanskrit was used in religious ceremonies and scholarly texts. 8. Besides Buddhism, which was the main religion of the ruling and intellectual classes, indigenous animist beliefs coexisted in the lives of the people, and some influence of Hinduism, Shaivism, was also recorded. 8. This diversity reflected the nature of a maritime empire, open, syncretic, and connecting many different cultures. 2.5 Legacy and Decline. The legacy that Srivijaya left to the history of Southeast Asia is immense. They shaped the Mandala-style maritime state model, a unique political model suited to the geographical conditions of the archipelago. They made a significant contribution to the spread of Malay culture and language throughout the region, laying the foundation for the development of the later nations of Malaysia and Indonesia. And above all, they created a brilliant international Buddhist center, a beacon of knowledge and spirituality. However, from the 11th century, the empire began a long process of decline. The causes of this collapse were a combination of many factors. Militarily, attacks from the Cholas of India and the rise of rival kingdoms in Java such as Kediri and later Majapahit severely weakened Srivijaya's naval and economic power. 8. Economically, a change in the trade policy of the Southern Song dynasty in China broke Srivijaya's monopoly. Chinese merchant ships became more active, able to go directly to the spice-producing ports without going through Srivijayan intermediaries, thus reducing the importance of Palembang. 8. Politically, the loose mandala structure revealed its weakness. As the central power weakened, vassals, from Camp and Malu to the petty states on the Malay Peninsula, seceded one by one or fell into the sphere of influence of newly emerging powers like Sukhothai of the Thais. 8. By the end of the 13th century, the Srivijayan Empire was a shadow of its former self and gradually disintegrated completely. When placing Srivijaya alongside continental empires like Funan and especially Angkor, a classic contrast in the model of power building in ancient Southeast Asia emerges. On one side is power based on controlling land, managing freshwater resources, and mobilizing labor for large-scale agricultural production. On the other side is power based on controlling sea lanes, strategic straits, and the flow of trade. Angkor, as we shall see, built enormous power by mastering the freshwater resources of the Tunnel Sap Lake, creating a centralized, somewhat inward-looking society with the ability to mobilize resources to create great architectural works. 10. In contrast, Srivijaya built its wealth and influence by mastering the straits and international trade flows, creating a decentralized, outward-looking society connected to the outside world. 8. The strength of one model was the weakness of the other. Angkor could mobilize manpower to build immortal structures, but was vulnerable to environmental and logistical problems on land. Srivijaya was wealthy, flexible, and had a broad cultural influence, but was completely dependent on external factors such as the trade policies of major partners or the rise of a rival fleet that could challenge its control of the seas. The history of ancient Southeast Asia, therefore, cannot be fully understood without recognizing the parallel existence and competition between these two models of power. Srivijaya is the most typical and successful example of the maritime empire model, a model that profoundly shaped the history of the Malay-Indonesian archipelago. Its decline paved the way for a successor empire, Majapahit, to rise and write the final chapter of the Hindu-Buddhist era in the archipelago.